start from the principles. Those principles can be quite cost effective if you do them right.
Today we have the principal of one of the best architectural studios, in my opinion, in the region. We have Jonathan Ashmore from ANARCHITECT here.
That's very sweet of you guys, you know.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Yeah, really looking forward to having a good conversation with you guys.
Where do you start to find in the context of starting or building a project?
Architecture can work with nature. It doesn't always have to protect and restrict and enclose you. It can actually draw it in as long as it manages it.
Apart from materiality, what does make building timeless?
Is there a future for AI in hospitality, or will we see that the trend will, we don't need AI?
Luxury is about time. It's about having the time to enjoy and to really understand a space.
Hi, Valeria.
Hi, Seth.
How are you?
Good.
Another week, another recording.
Yeah, which is fun. And we are coming to the end of the season.
We're approaching the end of the season.
Slowly but surely,
yeah,
that's for sure.
Valeria, today we have an award-winning studio. We have, of course, the principal of one of the best architectural studios, in my opinion, in the region.
Absolutely.
They're not only based in Dubai, but they're also based in London. We have Jonathan Ashmore from ANARCHITECT here today. We're so thankful to exchange some words with you, and we've waited a long time to have you on the podcast.
Exciting.
That's very sweet of you guys.
Thank you so much,
elusive
Jonathan.
as much as I end up being sometimes. But yeah, really looking forward to having a good conversation with you guys.
Welcome.
I know that your schedule is very busy. I want to dive right into the question, and I want to ask you, if you met your 25-year-old self today, what would he say about your life now and where it's taken you?
It's actually an interesting thing to think now. That's actually close to 20, or it's actually more than 20 years ago. And to think about that is quite a lot. I think, from a very young age, I always wanted to be an architect. So that path I'd kind of set for myself from very early on. And I think it was just about the intrigue into the industry of what I really found. So it was this idea that I would follow this path. And I think in terms of being in the UK, where I was originally born and based and worked for the first part of my career, it's quite a sort of a regimented way of, education. It's about 7 years in total. When I graduated, so when I'm 25, I will still have just been in London at this time. I've been quite fortunate. It was a very busy time in architecture, and then the UK was booming. And I'd gone through a series of schools. I'd studied in Liverpool, a very kind of city that was quite, full of heritage, full of kind of like culture, very dynamic, very edgy. Then I moved to London and worked from there as well. And I think, I was very lucky as soon as I graduated and finished my sort of full-time education, going into my sort of like professional education side. I'd had a chance to build and work on quite a lot of buildings, based in the capital, based outside the capital, various different projects, music rehearsal studios, residential. And I think, at that point, age 25, I was very fortunate to have accomplished quite a lot and learned from some great people. Both the people that I was at university with, the tutors, but also the practices that I worked for when I graduated. And in that sense, I think, looking back, the decisions that sort of folded then was about, well, what's life beyond the UK? What is life like outside? And where will that take me as an architect?
But what made you think this way? Because, there are so many great companies in UK, as you said.
You know what? I think I always had this idea that I love design. I love art. I love creativity. But I also like rationality, and I like reasoning, and I like to understand why you do something. My father was in engineering. He was in steel engineering. Grew up in Yorkshire, but I'd always come home and there'd be big A1 drawings over the table. Not that he was drawing architecture. It was more like engineering and more kind of like technical. But at the same time, I'd be there, doing my art at school and then coming back and painting and just trying to draw. It was just that sort of, it felt like a career that you could balance the best of two worlds. So looking back, I'd be quite shocked. I didn't think I'd be in Dubai, the Middle East, but I kind of think at that age, I felt there was a sort of burning inside to explore outside the UK.
What made you come to the region? What was it?
I was ready to leave. Like I said, it felt like I could confidently take a leap, a bit of faith, see what life was like beyond the island of the UK. And I came to visit Dubai, and I sort of sensed this energy. I mean, this was in 2009. There was this 2008, 2009, there was this real energy and this opportunity. There was this unexpected kind of ambition that was starting to permeate, and I was seeing that.
Yeah.
And I got headhunted ultimately, and I got offered a job to leave the UK and to relocate to Dubai. I just thought, why not? I mean, it's a great chance. Maybe it will evolve me as an architect. Maybe I'll learn new skills. I'll certainly know more people, get to understand more culture, a different side. And I'd chosen in my time at the Bartlett School of Architecture, which was my sort of master's, I'd chosen to actually study architecture that was more towards Asia, because it was, again, something I didn't know, a context I didn't necessarily, I'd read about, but I'd not experienced. So I guess perhaps even that decision that I did when I took that particular course and unit at that school with those tutors, my draw towards the Middle East, Asia, Africa, places beyond what I'd experienced, within the locality of where I was from or who I was.
Within the comfort zone, if we can say.
I think it's maybe a comfort zone, but
it's also a completely different way of thinking and create, and the layout, the way of structure, the way of materials. It's completely different from what we use in Europe.
Yeah, no, it's climate, and I think perhaps we might, get touch later on this, but it's actually where I got my sort of like intrigue and sort of passion for context. You want to really understand differences between places, differences between cultures, differences between people. And I thought, that was the time to really get that experience without necessarily feeling as though I needed to control it so much. I'd felt, let's take a chance, take a risk, see what happens. And 17 years later.
What pushed you further to start your own practice here in the region?
It's a good question. It wasn't the intention. I think for every young architect, you think about eventually, doing your own thing, your own studio. But I think that comes out of a necessity to do something that you're really passionate about and what you really believe in. And I think after I first came to Dubai and started to understand what it was about, this was, early 2009, 10. I'd worked for some significant companies in the UK. I also worked for a very well-known practice here in Dubai. And what I felt was it made me seek what I wanted to do. Sometimes when you don't know, if you're in a very competitive market, you follow the trends or you follow the wave of where things are going. Well, I felt with Dubai, you actually had the opportunity to make your own choices. And you either like doing this or you don't like doing that. So you were the only one that would take that opportunity to carve where you were going. And what I really had begun to miss was this sort of holistic ideology that architecture is also interiors, it's also objects, it's also design, it's also furniture. And I felt that my experience that I was getting or I was involved with was not going that direction.
Yeah.
So I guess the thing that became the missing part of my own, intrigue, which I didn't know until I'd actually experienced it as something that was missing, I then steered to then think about, well, the only way I'm going to get to do this is to set it up myself and then pursue that direction and see where it goes.
It's very interesting you say that, because back then, especially I think that in 2009 when you came, 2013, the whole city was very much about this whole spectacle, very theatrical, and the style of your company, of an architect as a practice, is very refined, and it's I would even say very minimal. I think back then, maybe not now, but back then it was a very brave move, because you also need to make sure that it's accommodates to the market.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
It was the idea that architecture for me is almost a way of life. It's a way of thinking. It's just something it's in my sensibility. And the idea that it's not necessarily has to be sort of like restricted to a scale, be that a huge scale, be that a city scale, it can also be an object scale or a spatial scale. And I think, seeing the transition, this was key times. Places were moving, Dubai is very transient, it's very progressive. There was a certain sort of passion that people started to have about creating their own restaurants, thinking about their own health clubs, creating their own houses. It was something that was a growing and fast developing design scene.
Yeah.
And I think with that, that's where I started to fall and started to feel that's where the opportunity. And then, the key started to unlock where there were clients that really actually understood the value of good design, the quality of materials, the idea of design, uniqueness and independence.
Yeah.
And, some of our early projects were just about being authentic to what was the purpose of that project
The context.
trying to do. Whether it was a restaurant, a health club, eventually a boutique hotel. It was about trying to create projects that I felt were what the client wanted. They were, I'd say, progressive, but they were progressive in a way. They were something that was perhaps lacking, or something that was an opportunity in a function, in a style, or something. But they were all just came out of process. They were never forced, and I think that's perhaps where that shifted. Perhaps,
Jonathan, you spoke about Asian design before, and I can't get away with actually seeing the resemblance a little bit about Tadawando and your studio. I don't know if there is any backstory or like you guys are inspired by, but I see the really, the restricted approach of design compared to the scale that we have been speaking about now in Dubai. Is that a direction that you feel that speaks to an architect as a studio, or is that just a coincidence?
It's a good question. I feel, we're all influenced, and the work of Tadao, I mean, it's immense to be considered that that you can see that in our work. He's a living legend, but at the same time, I think it's about being true to the architecture, to the process. Asia did actually surprisingly start to permeate my practice. As I started to practice more and more from Dubai and working from Dubai, we were fortunate enough to go and work in Asia, work in Africa. And I think I was drawing on that first experience that I'd had when I was at the Bartlett School, when I'd actually gone to Malaysia and, experienced the first sort of monsoon tropical rainstorm. And this was a courtyard house at which, as soon as it heavily rained, water came into the center of the courtyard. There was a small, slow draining pool, which the water cooled down the space and took away the humidity and then transformed it. And you're like, okay, well, architecture can work with nature. It doesn't always have to protect and restrict and enclose you. It can actually draw it in as long as it manages it. And I think, the work of Tadao, the work of, architects that work predominantly in Asia, like Kerry Hill, some of these architects understand climatic, passive design approaches. And I feel, with Tadao, and, perhaps it maybe resonates to some of the more, concrete, brutalist, minimalist work that we've done. It's about suitability of material. Those buildings are either in the middle of the desert where it's about thermal mass. It's a huge, robust sort of material that can withstand, extreme temperatures. Or it's coastal, it's perhaps on the coast in Sri Lanka where you've got such high salt content. Many other materials can't survive such aggressive climate conditions. And, Tadao and others, that's what drove them, Jeffrey Bauer. Those people realized what materials are going to last beyond handing over the keys and walking away from the project.
And we can see it now.
Yeah, you experience it.
Definitely.
And that's true architecture.
It's very clear. So what apart from materiality, which I think is one of the main factors, what does make building timeless? We're all trying to follow the trends, biophilia trend. There are so many trends right now that I'm lost. But also, I think very important factor, and it's been relevant in the past and it's relevant today, is this balancing commercial aspect of the client, but also your architectural integrity that will last, which is, I feel like it's every designer's or architect's main goal. So how do you do that? How do you achieve that?
It's a good question because, architecture is about balance. Without clients, you can't create the architecture. And at the same time, the architect has a responsibility to, in my opinion, to push the boundaries and to challenge the briefs and to deliver something for that client or for the people that are going to actually experience. An architect doesn't necessarily have a house style. I never set that out because that would be for me quite restrictive. We approach things in what we might call a contextual modernism. So that's about architecture that's a place, but it's also about understanding principles of modernity, which is, clarity of space, daylight, framing, flexibility, fluidity, materials. And when you talk about sort of, what makes something, last, what is about that type of thing? Daylight. 100%. We are human, and, humans are completely, their entire circadian rhythms, their mood everything is actually dictated by daylight. More often than not, I like to try to make our buildings and spaces tell you the time of day without you having to look at a watch. I want you to understand where you are in the world, and our team work very rigorously to understand so that you can understand what time of day it is according to where daylight is coming within the space. That is something that connects you and you as a building, you as a person, and a human experience and emotion with that project. That makes it timeless. It could be a house, it could be a hotel, it could be a restaurant. That connection is there with those spaces. And then you start to think about the fundamentals. Like if you always start at the basics, the things you were taught at architectural school, which is where we always start, the orientation, the choice of materials, the flow of people, the narrative of which it's sort of established. And then you build on that with the client, with the context, with the culture, and with the purpose. The architecture and the building or the space, or sometimes the object, forms out of that process. And that's what creates this idea of, timelessness and longevity. And at the same time, that process, you get as far and you manage your design to a point of equilibrium. So you don't have excessive materials. You don't have things that are not needed. You get to a balance when you actually know that's where is the sort of cutoff point of where the architecture and the interior exists and so forth. So you then start to think of that from a client perspective is you're not wasting money. You're doing as much as you can with the base of fundamentals. So if you orientate your building correctly, they're not going to have to overpay on AC. They're not going to have to overpay on things like that. They're not also, if you draw in as much natural daylight as possible and understand the ways of way daylight can benefit, the electricity bills can be reduced. They're not having to put as much daylight or artificial light to kind of capture dark spaces in your house. So it is, for me, I have to remain, whenever we're doing, grounded and start from the principles. And those principles can be quite cost effective if you do them right. Good quality material, robust, doesn't need to be the most glamorous, most expensive material. That might not be the most suitable. So that's where that balance of the discussion comes early on with the projects, with that client. And then it's a dialogue.
It's funny you mentioned circadian rhythms because, again, that came back like as a trend, I would say, right? But the whole, if you look at architects, that's the main principle that's been used for centuries. And like you said, everything evolves around that specific rhythm and the light, and it's very, very interesting subject, I feel.
We've done installations. We have an ongoing research within our studios about the sort of how architecture is influenced by daylighting and how through technology and through passive design, working with light, artificial
How do you do
light.
that?
Well, we'll do installations in various design weeks, or we'll do small paper studies, or what we'll do is we'll try to test ways in which either people, or you see how people respond to a space, to how you might anticipate they might respond to a space in a particular lit space. You balance between what is a natural lighting versus artificial, replicating the natural lighting. even our studio that we've just completed, we've actually incorporated human-centric tunable white light. So at certain times of the day, it goes to matching the daylight times to the evenings. And, you know, it's through technology and through ability to do that, you can start to mimic. And it is proven that it does affect your subconscious sort of, you know, understanding and timeliness.
I knew that this conversation is going to be a very good conversation with Jonathan.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about technicalities and we're talking about, we're touching points that we actually haven't discussed so much in the podcast previously when it comes to, especially, now we're especially talking maybe about
the hospitality
sector. And we talk a lot about context and how to actually genuinely implement, you know, context into when we start to work. You've touched already a couple of points on this question, but how do you, or where do you start to sort of generally, you know, bind in the context of starting or building a project?
I mean, we're quite fortunate, you know, being based here, but also been able to kind of work quite globally. You know, we've worked and been fortunate to work both in the Middle East, across the Middle East, various different parts of the GCC, but also Asia and now Africa as well as Europe. And this idea of context is both physical and non-physical. It's tangible, intangible. You know, context is what's in front of you. It's the physicality of the site. It's the topography. It's the materiality. It's also the actual climate, the climate patterns. But at the same time, context is also social. It's societal. It's cultural. And I guess when you're forming particularly, you know, hospitality projects and particularly luxury hospitality, you think about experience. And it's about sort of how you imagine someone as a guest or a visitor is going to connect and, you know, enjoy that experience in that particular property or so forth. So you have to pick and choose the context about where you think that fills and creates the narrative for such a project. The same thing is also, you know, contextually, sometimes you might be in a quite remote location. That dictates materiality. You know, you're sourcing local materials, but at the same time, well, if you're sourcing local materials in Sri Lanka, for example, on the south coast, well, you're also engaging with local contractors that have built and worked there for, you know, decades. Well, what's really quite nice is to kind of understand how they work, to talk with them, and to think not just about the designing, but also about the making and designing so that they can make it. But you're in a dialogue, so you have this discussion, you find out things about how they do, the culture of hospitality in that region, or the culture of actually, you know, the surrounding community, and embedding them, because more and more we're realizing, both from, you know, well-traveled clients, you know, hospitality, you know, operators, it's all about authenticity. It's all about that experience, about tying that location and a reason to go there.
And now more and more.
More and more. And bringing those all together help you to kind of form the unique concept and narrative for that particular project, derive just what you have in front of you. And it's about curating that, pulling that together. You know, the fact that the person that's perhaps, you know, you're learning from is also the person that's going to help make that project. They're going to be a contractor on site. They're going to be a builder. They're going to be a carpenter. But it's also our responsibility as, you know, not being based there. We're learning as much as we can, you know, this global, local approach that we like to call an architect, is that we're coming from the outside perspective, but we're researching the local perspective. So bringing this new idea, you can challenge how they might normally make a building or how they might normally create a chair. And you add, through conversation, they learn something and you learn something.
That's the beauty.
And that sets new context. Context is always moving. So whenever the building is finished, the next person in the next site refers to that previous project as a reference of context. You know, the Bilbao effect.
Yeah.
And then that's what I find really amazing. And that is the power of good design, but also everything connected with design, experience, emotion, you know, spaces.
But also community, yeah.
Community,
I mean,
completely.
How do you think a good design improves someone's life?
If it connects, if it really, you know, if you can get a design, firstly, that feels that it should be there, that it belongs there, you know, it feels natural in its place. it has a purpose and it's relevant. It gives back to the community, or it reveals through perhaps a hospitality experience, it reveals a new culture or a new landscape to people that then care for it longer and look after it for a wider, interest. I've always had this interest. Again, it comes back from, when I was taught in architecture school, this time before in my undergraduate, I was always interested in the sort of concept of how space influences people, subtlety and subconsciously. So, the study briefly in one of my papers was about semiotics. It's about finding your natural way through a building without having to be told through signs that it's left to the bathrooms or it's right to the dining room. How do you start to work with those spaces, and how do you start to play with them? And that makes it really intriguing as a designer, as an architect. How are people going to use your buildings? What are they going to do, and what's going to take on, and how do you connect? And by being able to think about spatially, is it a compact space? Is it volumetric? Is it compression? You think if you're sat in a living room, you want to be quite cozy, or do you want to be in a grand hall where you've got a fantastic view? Is it vertical? Is it horizontal? All of those things are just in the subconscious mind. And if you can kind of capture them and understand them spatially in architecture, you can really connect and really make sort of that experience happen in terms of projects.
That's beautiful. It's almost poetic when you speak about it. I was like, I reflect on everything we do, and I think,
just go to a space and just sort of like dissect it and just think, why do I like this space? Or what is that? How is that influencing me or others around me? It's like observing. We often don't have the time to do it, but when you do, it's nice.
Which we don't.
No.
But, an architect became almost a synonym of quiet luxury, if you want to say it or not. I know it's so overused.
I agree.
And we've mentioned it so many times, and, it's in every publication and everything. But I must say it's true that you've done so many hospitality projects. What is luxury for you personally, or how do you perceive luxury as an architect?
I think it's what I just said there. Luxury is about time. It's about having the time to enjoy and to really understand a space. And I think when it comes to hospitality, it's one of those opportunities for a project, to connect with its guests and to bring some form of learning, some sort of revealing, whether it's an emotional, it's an intellectual. I mean, regenerative travel, where you actually are now experiencing it through agriculture, whether it's food production, it's winings. I think, the shift and the move that we're seeing across our clients is about removal from noise to go back to sort of very much what you connect with and what you can enjoy. Wellness is obviously a very key factor.
Yeah.
I mean, but the wellness also comes with time. It's about longevity. It's about being able to kind of reinvest in yourself and understand the priorities and the hierarchy of what you want to do. And then for me, luxury is about being able to kind of facilitate a lot of those things. It's also about aesthetics. I mean, however it might be, not the thing. Beauty is a very powerful thing, and proportions, durability, materiality, natural. Yeah. Nature is the one thing that, like we said before, that's why we always want to start from the fundamentals, is that some place, some location always has some sort of baseline context. And there is all of these different elements of nature, whether it be in a city center or be a very rural, location, trying to tap in and really tie into those essences of actually what is nature doing for you, and revealing them through that hospitality, hotel, restaurant experience, with the client, and building with them their narrative. What do they want to communicate to their guests? Who is their guest? And thinking about that from a spatial consideration, and working closely with your clients to tell the story of that hotel, that brand, that restaurant, that chef.
Yeah.
And I guess there's so much information. It's about filtering and trying to get to those essence. So yeah, luxury is a lot of things, but I do feel the shift is certainly towards, being able to kind of take your time to be able to truly enjoy and to take something and give something back.
Yeah.
from your experience?
I feel like that's where we are heading.
beautiful.
Where we are heading as a hospitality.
We need to speak a little bit about Alfaya Lodge. It's also considered one of the most important hospitality projects that we have in the region.
Yeah.
Right? So
It refers to the context, definitely, to the environment. And
100%.
Yeah.
What did that project teach you?
how did it generally start?
Yeah.
It was quite an interesting, unexpected brief for particularly the UAE. I mean, it's in Sharjah, it's not in Dubai, but it's obviously one of the key emirates in the UAE. And firstly, for me, it was exciting because it was in such an amazing context. It's at the foot of what is now a UNESCO heritage site. It's a fossilized rock formation in the middle of the Malaya Desert, which is almost sort of like iridescent red color, full of iron oxide. And it was almost kind of intimidating to start with. But the client came to us and they told us that they have these two old abandoned buildings from the 1950s that were either side of this through road, which used to be a caravan route from the east to the west coast. And it had the oldest petrol pump, or presumably the oldest petrol pump in the UAE, we believed, with no formal confirmation of that.
That's like a dream, architect's dream.
It is. And you start thinking cinematic, you start thinking movie sets, and you start thinking, what can this be? But also there's this responsibility. So one building was previously a grocery store. The other one was actually a medical clinic. And they were, in a sort of dilapidated state, but we felt the need to bring them back to life, regenerate them, adaptively reuse them, but change the program and also be conscious about the scale. We added a third building, which is the quite sort of famous saltwater spa, which is this open sort of brutalist almost box with these Corten perforated butterfly doors. And that was about trying to really imagine, and I was inspired by, the idea of such a concept in a landscape was the idea, it's not just about the horizon, it's about the skyscape. You don't realize until you go out into the desert in the UAE how much the skies and the climate actually changes. As particularly from winter to summer, clouds formation, heavy storm clouds, bright blue, iridescent, strong colors to being kind of like more mystified. It was just this idea that whatever we create will never be as powerful as nature. So we need to create a building that actually reveals nature for the guests that stay there.
Even the night scene,
it's
if you go out in the desert when there is like clear sky and you just look at the stars, it's just magical.
There's no light pollution. And where else do you get to experience that? And to be honest, Shad, that's what was the reason for why it felt innate that this building should be the antithesis of the 5-star luxury resort. It needs to be it has the responsibility to reveal the true nature of the UAE to those that choose to go and stay there. It's the sky, it's the stars at night, it's the campfire, it's the horizon, it's the sunrise, it's the sunset, in a very, what we refer to as a primordial way. It's back to basics. And that's where the luxury has come from, I think.
What responsibilities does the architect have to the space then?
Well, it's about framing the view. It's about protecting you when you're inside from the elements. It's about community. It's about solitude. So, the rooms are quite small, but we didn't decide to demolish. We didn't decide to overdevelop. We wanted to kind of design a room that you could inhabit comfortably that was 16 square meters. I mean, that was unheard of. That was the size of a box room. But what did we do? We created natural daylight through creating light wells in the ceiling. We created an extension that we introduced Corten. So Corten clearly, as a rusting, weathering steel, shows of that building what is new and what is old. So you pass by, the layering of that building. What was old and authentic and what is new and transformative. We framed the views outside each room so that everyone could have an individual, but it was obviously going to be the potential that it would be a collective of friends or a group of people that would take the lodge. There's 5 rooms. So there's a choice, whether it's individuals that meet the neighbor and create a new friendship, or it's a group of people that want to go and retreat together and enjoy. The same with the spa. The spa added the time element. We wanted to create, there's no reason if it was just to stay overnight and have the restaurant, we wanted to create a spa experience that was saltwater. It was very much authentic health, but it was inspired by the sand silica salt. The Corten was inspired by the iron content in the sand dunes. It was just derived from its concept and its context. And yeah, we were influenced quite heavily by the work of Rick Joy and Wendell Burt, the guys that done Amangiri, and you thought about what it must have been like to go and visit that hotel over in Utah, and you're like, well, what if we did something but was very much genuinely for this place here, and a much more small scale. And yeah, the project was just done from the heart, and with quite a lot of grunt and physical site works, pushing it through with the client, and then we just let it live after to see what happened. It was a bit of an experiment, I guess.
Yeah, there is so much essence to this project, I feel. But having said that, is adaptive reuse buildings, do you feel like they're still unappreciated in the region?
I think adaptive reuse is a very important sustainable methodology, but it's also important culturally.
Yeah.
I think you find with the project that we did, I mean, these were 2 redundant buildings with the Al Fire in the desert, so perhaps they were probably not known, and perhaps through that project, people have got to know them and understand them. We've then since done quite a few other projects. One was also the Sarai Wing, which was the extension of the Chedi Hotel also in Sharjah, but this was in the old fishing heart of Sharjah on the creek coast. And adaptive reuse is a responsibility to show the layers, to show culture, show heritage. But at the same time, I don't think it should be pastiche. It shouldn't try to recreate history. It should work with it. It's like a good book. I mean, someone writes a new chapter and you want to see the evolution of projects. I think it's getting more and more well done in the region. Perhaps, one of the key places that I've seen some amazing work is in Bahrain, in the Murak area. Similarly, where I believe the city first established from the settlement and from trade, much like, the areas, the heart of Sharjah in Sharjah, you've got the area around the creek in Dubai. It's getting more and more understood that this can also be a modern, contemporary, luxury experience. Relevant
to our time.
Without the need to demolish. It's also highly sustainable, in a way you're protecting the embedded sort of energy within such a building, the embedded culture. I mean, it's a layering. People from the region want to also see their legacy and their history evolve as each generation builds more. So adaptive reuse is something that, we became quite good at doing in Europe, and just by chance, the opportunity happens to continue here. And we were fortunate enough to have clients that were also, willing to give the chance and to do that rather than, go straight to just demolish and build something new. And I think from that, it's stemmed, and we've seen some other, peers doing some amazing work.
And I feel like we're seeking it now more than before.
I think it's as the city evolves and as it matures and understands, these are established districts, they're communities, the sense of scale, and it really is a sort of it's a commitment, and it's almost you have a responsibility to sort of respect that.
But I think also I'm speaking as an expat. We come from the western part of the world, for example, and we come with a luggage and an understanding of design and of building
and authenticity
that we are used to, and we want to, of course, bring it to this region. We want to implement it into our work, but easily forget how important the culture and the heritage of the region is, and how much we can learn from that and adapt that into our projects. So maybe it's also us understanding more and more of the heritage of the region and trying to respect it more and trying to preserve it in the project, which I think is extremely important. And we see that a lot in you guys as well. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about client experience and the approach of an architect. What do you think a client's approach of talking about luxury, for example, what do they get wrong when they come to you guys? What do they like? What's their, their thought process of what luxury is compared to what you guys can enhance and you guys can, bring to the table?
It's a challenging question in case any of my clients are actually watching.
No, I mean,
no, I'm joking.
In case they're listening.
In they're listening. No, firstly, with the projects that we engage, we never want to do the same thing twice. We're always listening and looking and working with clients to really sort of work with them to really deliver what they want, but also to push the boundaries. I think, preconceptions from a luxury perspective is perhaps the understanding how long it takes to properly create something, a building, a home, a hotel. I think the preconceptions of time, where technology is making everything faster, but that doesn't always mean that everything's better. And I feel that perhaps the understanding that to evolve something takes time. But at the same time, I don't also believe, I think it's something I've learned from being here, quite a number of years now, is that to have too much time is also not so good.
Yeah.
Because you then start to ruminate and repeat. I always default back to what was the gut instinct, to when that client came in, presented the idea of what they wanted to do, and you got the first gut instinct. Your second brain tells you what you want to do, and you work that with the team, and ultimately you end up coming a full circle back to that sort of element. I suspect that perhaps you've mentioned it, Valeria, and I guess there is so much information and so much visual stimulation out there that the perception of luxury is perhaps something that's been taken from out of context or taken from elsewhere. And then I guess when I try to talk with clients, whether we're doing it as a hotel, about what's the new thing that guests want to experience, or it's a private residential, how do you want to represent your own home and your family and your visitors and your guests? It's kind of trying to break down that preconception of what they believe or what they want luxury is and distilling it. Is it about materials? Is it about daylight? Is it about authenticity? Is it about this? Or is it something that's very much an image that they've perceived to be a luxurious element? And I guess what we try to encourage is to sort of trust the process and understand that we are listening, but it's also, we want to challenge you. And, perhaps they haven't been challenged before, or people wouldn't dare challenge, but we kind of say, look, trust us, the challenge will make a better project for you. And if it feels like it's an extension of you, that's the ultimate luxury, right? That is what you want to be able to do. It's a home, a hotel, something that belongs from the creation of the process that you were part of. So,
how would you approach if a client had a very tight schedule, timeline?
well, I draw on my, nearly 1.5 decades of Dubai experience, because time is something that is very much accelerated here. I think what I just touched on before, it's this gut instinct. There is, when you've been practicing for nearly on 2 decades and working closely with such a talented team of people and collaborators beyond the ANARCHITECT studios, you start to see, I won't say similarities, but you start to you can hone in quicker on what you believe is the essence of a project. And I guess with those clients, and when they come like that, sometimes we'll say, look, maybe this is just not right for us and we're not right for you. At the same time, just sort of challenge them and say, look, what happens if we do this, we start this and you progress it? Because there's one thing I've come to know is we try to see projects all the way from the inception right to the handing over the keys to completion, and working with a team of, from design across the different engineering through to contracting and artisans. It's a long process.
Yeah.
And trying to get to that whole thing, you've got to think, what is the end goal to then work back? And, knowing how long things take and what they're going to go to, we have to be quite honest and transparent, but that's where we go.
I think it's also a very different timeline when you do a hospitality project or a commercial project, let's put it this way, rather than doing someone's residential project, which might actually take years, specifically because of that process that maybe there is too much time for thinking.
Well, that's actually, that is
to take
true.
a decision.
No, it's true. And I guess also it could be perceived by that. But what you also might think about is that actually how that experience working with a professional client in a corporate or a commercial world actually then can influence the way you work with a private residential client. It's much better to be more efficient and to follow a stage of process that the time is restricted. You don't give it an endless duration, because it dilutes the process and the energy and the excitement. It's a long drawn process anyway, from construction, through design to construction. You really want to focus that client in. And, for me, architecture and design only really starts when you hand the keys over, when they start to inhabit a building, when they take you over, they start placing their artworks, however they do, they live the space. And the same thing with hospitality. Yes, they have deadlines, they have commercial delivery deadlines, and learning from that, working closely with some, amazing design, operators and contractors and various different clients in the corporate commercial world helps the residential. But at the same time, the residential is personal. It's emotional. And you take that into the commercial world. And that's when you say, well, our clients have been traveled. They told me about this experience of hotel, or they did a safari, or they did something. They felt so emotionally connected by that experience. Well, if we're doing a new hotel for you guys, this is your client. This is who you're talking to. Let's think about stitching that into the project. It might take a few more weeks to find out what it was, but it's just research. And at the end of the day, it creates a very big document book that kind of leads to hopefully the end goal.
Do you feel a big difference between what the client used to be 10 years back or when you arrive here than what the client is today?
No, for sure. The UAE is extremely adaptive. It's very progressive, and it moves at such a fast pace, and the demands move along with it. Certainly, it is amazing to be in such a sort of dynamic kind of industry, as well as being in a sort of dynamic part of the world where there is a sort of receptiveness. So to actually challenging and progressing. No longer is it just an imported idea. I mean, you mentioned it, Shad, the idea that we're expats and coming here. I'm equally an expat, but the great thing is that it's this sort of balance, and now it's almost like what's been created in the region is starting to permeate other continents, and it's now at the forefront.
Yeah, homegrown is very
homegrown,
much. Yeah,
I think it's something to be proud of, and I think it's come through a sort of an open idea of being innovative and willing to give chance to young designers, young architects, not having to have necessarily in a classic way proven yourself for, 2-3 decades of work before you're given a chance to create that and, great house or that boutique hotel. There's a lot more risk, but at the same time, perhaps it's been a lot more reward from that.
Jonathan, you've been here for some time now, but what trend did you see was the main trend the past decade? And what trend do you see in hospitality being the coming decade?
Luxury has been paramount here, and it has been the ultimate draw of creating hotels and experiences that have really, surpassed what was previous traditional luxury experiences. And I think that's been sort of very, very successful for the region and for Dubai. In more recent periods, and I think it also goes to be tied with how much sort of residential is such a strong sector here, is the brand of residence. And the idea of ownership and the idea of living in a hotel, but living so it becomes your own place as well as part of the experience of a hotel. So you're getting the best of both worlds.
With all the facilities, yeah.
The facilities, the community, the service. But at the same time, it's a home, it's ownership. You can host and do what you want. It's your own space. And that's been the evolution over the last 5-6 years that has sort of naturally progressed to that. There's two sectors that have started to really kind of merge together. I guess the third is like you mentioned that we talked about with the Al Fayed, the Sarai, the projects that are a little bit more authentic, a little bit more understated. There's been a draw towards that. Sharjah, parts of Abu Dhabi, the mangrove areas. There is this sort of understanding and a respect also for the nature, understanding for the sensitivity of scale. And I feel that this in the general trend globally, we're seeing it in projects in Africa, Asia, but also in Central Europe and back in the UK. It's a sort of shift to nature. It's a shift to moving hospitality into might either be regenerative, if it's in a different location, so that's through agriculture, or it might be a transformative where you actually are going to do a community experience and it's a wellness retreat. And I feel the way in the shift of hospitality is definitely about building and sort of strengthening communities and experiences together where people can do it collectively. It's either the social club element, the members club were quite popular a year ago or so, 2 years, but I guess how that then permeates into hospitality, it's about going and doing shared experiences. And then you continue that life together. It's people that go cycling around Europe, that go and stay. I think there is this draw towards the authentic experience, but also about the removal from your day-to-day, daily stressful life, and that you want to kind of go and relax and experience that. And that's the shift.
What a beautiful trend, guys.
Yeah. But speaking about experiential travel and what guests are looking right now, especially in hospitality, when they ask you that they need this hero images or Google, where do you start?
Well, I think I had mentioned, for me also, aesthetics is an important draw. Beauty is something
for
that
all of us,
attracts many, many people. And that image, that picture postcard, it's ingrained in what tourism and what hospitality is all about. You've got to attract people to come to your new location, to trust in the venture. But it's about building around that. What's the culinary experience? Who's the restaurateur within that settlement? Who is perhaps even setting the scene with the music? Is it the sort of a stage? There's a lot more now that have all sort of hybridized from hospitality, from restaurateurs, from art, from galleries that have all sort of permeated into the hospitality sector, and that's then informed the residential sectors as well. So I guess, the shift towards longevity, the shift towards wellness, that's been happening for a long time, but I think it will get even more evolved. The integration of technology now, so you're able to understand your own sort of biology and your own metrics about what it's like to be, relaxed or in a state of calm, or, doing a yoga retreat or doing a
retreat.
Agriculture, you're learning a new skill. You're contributing to a community. I believe it's all about experiences. And I guess that is pretty much what every other hotel and every hospitality wants to do. And if they can somehow capture that experience in one amazing picture postcard or a short video reel, that is what attracts, because ultimately it's a highly competitive market.
So we're talking about the importance of nature, and we're talking about the importance of, the set in general and using the set in our design. What does that mean for AI in hospitality? Is there a future for AI in hospitality, or will we see that the trend will, we don't need AI?
Dissolve and we're going to go back.
Dissolve and go back to nature and to the roots and to, I wouldn't mind, but how do you see it?
No, it's definitely a trend right now, yes.
Look, I think however much AI
say the right thing now, Jonathan.
AI is here to stay, and we have to embrace it. Even as a design practice where I still use my sketchbook, I have my pen, I physically make things, and that for me is actually where I start my process. And some people in the studio, the younger members, they'll default to certainly more computers and then exploring things with AI and challenging it. Look, it's a tool. For me, I believe a technology that succeeds is one that goes into your daily life uninhibiting, but it becomes part of part of your daily ritual, and something that can embed and be there. I think at the moment AI is such a big sort of boom. It's so all-consuming and undefinable in its way. But the fact is, it's transforming our society. It's making information so accessible. I think the progress, and those for me personally that will get it right, are to be able to distill what tools and how you can use it in the way that you want to use it to create your own singular identity rather than it becoming generic. And at the same time, perhaps if it can become switch on, switch off, like you choose when you want that convenience and when you can't. So you can almost say detox from it, but it feels as though it's embedded in your lifestyle. I think that's when AI, and eventually we'll come to that it just feels natural and we feel comfortable and you feel like you can just get on with your life. And convenience, everyone wants convenience. And that's where I think, AI is going. And in terms of either hospitality experience, lots of different hotel rooms, or responding to your own sort of like individual criteria, your name, choice of music, choice of smell, all of that starts to come together with data. But if it doesn't feel forced, if it feels as though it's a it just falls into it, and you as a guest feel comfortable and don't feel at threat. I think that's as it will be for me, when it's a success and it's going that way very quickly. So
yeah, it's very clear that the world is changing. When you hire new generation and new talents, young architects, what are the criteria that you were personally looking for? I mean, I'm sure that their perception is very different from ours. Their lifestyle is different. The timing is different. And obviously technology plays a very important role as well. So what are the main criteria that you're looking for? Maybe some people actually might apply after this.
No, I think you've got to be true to who you are. Ultimately, it's about, finding your own passion in design, having a voice, believing in what you're doing, even if it's perhaps wrong. You are willing to test, and you're willing to challenge, and you're willing to be curious. I mean, architecture is quite a broad spectrum anyway, as it even was when I was at university. Many people went into very different sectors. It gives you a general understanding and approach of creativity, sort of like scientific engineering backgrounds and so forth. So, I think it would always to remain curious. It's to be willing to speak out and believe in what it is you believe in and test it and do. It's to be true to the fundamentals. I find when I, meet young architects, they're always inquisitive. They're always asking questions. They're always trying to find out information. I think to draw on that information, but to kind of build your own voice and your own direction, and, feel confident in what you want to do and go and pursue it. I mean, learn your skills, and, it's always good to be able to converse, to network. That's how you meet people.
That's something timeless, very timeless. It didn't change. I feel like
Look, I'm just old school. I just always go back to what I believe is fundamental, because that's kind of what I know. That's what grounds me personally, because, technology is rapidly changing, and through the shift in the evolution in the industry as well, you kind of have to sometimes draw on what you feel familiar or comfortable with to then start a new challenge.
Yeah.
Guys, it's incredible. Time flies, like every discussion, and we have so many more questions for you, Jonathan. But I'm so sorry. We have to get to the final stage. So in end of each episode, Jonathan, we have the previous guest ask the up and coming guest a question.
Mm-hmm.
So that question is: do you think art can change a person's life?
Yeah, one's life.
Oh, that's a good question, actually. Firstly, yes, I do. I do believe it can, actually, as much as, architecture, art is equally something that can really stir your emotions. And, if it connects with you on whatever level, art can really change your perceptions or your understanding of a place. I mean, I'll probably draw on one of my experiences where I was first introduced to the work of James Turrell, the light artist, who's also an incredible scientist. And I remember sort of studying and just reading about some of the experiments that he was doing during the sort of like 70s about the perception of light, the understanding of space, and the transformation of space through his art of capturing and manipulating light. And we've spoken about these projects and we've discussed all these backgrounds. I'd say that his influence, even though perhaps I've only maybe experienced it once in the physicality, but after understanding and reading and being intrigued by it, it's affected quite a lot of my own personal work. And that was just from being introduced to someone, at university that said, oh, you should read about this artist. It's intriguing. It's similar to one of your student projects you're researching at the moment. And you realize that there's a science behind it. There is a subconsciousness about it. And somehow it resonated with me. So yeah, I do believe that art can change someone.
And you see and how important your daylight work in your studio is, and it still reflects what you guys are doing today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's amazing actually now how, I think he's in his late 70s, James Turrell is really coming to excuse the pun, coming to light. People are really understanding how significant this particular artist and this pilot and this, engineer was and is. And again, like you said, it's like merging that nature and the phenomena of daylight and night, lighting, and presenting it as an art spectacle and changing people's perceptions, and then making people realize that, wow, there is something quite spectacular out of that. And he, along with his team, have captured this sort of amazing, transformative medium of light as art.
Absolute beautiful conversation. Jonathan, what would your question be for our next guest?
Right, you know what? I'm going to have to read this one.
Yeah,
bring your sketchbook out.
The sketchbook will come out.
The sketchbook is out.
And it's something I did jot down when I got this featured question. So my question to the next guest is, and it's slightly related to what we've been discussing today, is as technology increasingly shapes the way we live and travel, what aspects of human experience do you believe should remain fundamentally analog?
Wow.
Very
I mean, it's a
interesting.
perfect question for our next guest.
I think so.
I look forward to finding out who it's going to be and what will be their answer.
You will see when it's released, for sure.
Keeping the suspense. Thank you so much,
Jonathan, thank you
what
so much.
What an insightful conversation.
It was an incredible conversation. I was just sitting here on the other side and just, listening to all of the wise words. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, and very nice to have a chat.
Thank you.
Hopefully it was interesting.